No, but Ambassador Shankar, except for the MAGA supporters, I don't know how enthused they are, but many of a large section of MAGA supporters also are not in favor of the war. But what do you think is going to be the impact of Donald Trump's today's address on the American mindset? Americans don't want a war. There are very clear signals coming, and the way the markets responded in the morning clearly shows that the country is not in favor of whatever Donald Trump is trying to convince the people with. So, is he going to face further rebellion? Is he going to face further opposition? And now that he has to face the midterm elections as well?
Look, his poll ratings have come down quite dramatically. I mean, only 33% of people support his military operation in Iran. And even amongst the Republicans, where his support was very high initially, it's come down, I think, from 80% or something to 61%. So that's a big drop within the Republicans. And overall support, as I said, is something like 33%. So that's a major concern for Trump, and that is when he will act, when he thinks the political cost of the war is too high for him.
Well, if you look at the portions of his speech, he also says that US's energy needs no longer dependent on Middle East. And then he goes on to make references about Venezuela in his address, praising the US troops for a rapid operation and that brought the country under control within minutes. Then he says that he tries to describe how the mission in Venezuela was. It was quick, lethal, and violent. And then he says that now US is working closely on developing and selling Venezuela's vast oil and gas reserve. Now, does this mean that US is now completely self-reliant because US has its own oil and gas reserves, and now whatever little shortfall was there, that is dependent on, and that way is going to be dependent on Venezuela. So, how far is it true that US doesn't have to depend on the Middle East?
It's true, and it's been true for quite some time because of the discovery of large reserves of shale gas in the United States. But extracting shale gas is expensive. So oil prices need to be above a certain threshold for shale gas exploitation to be competitive or to be profitable. And with prices the way they are today, the oil companies in the US will be raking in windfall profits. The US is not only self-reliant, they've been exporting oil. So actually, US dependence on the Middle East has come down because they're no longer really dependent on Middle East oil. They have their own oil reserves and they are exporting. And that has been one of Trump's major planks against the green economy, saying that we are self-sufficient in oil, so why shouldn't we, continue to drill and exploit more of our fossil fuel reserves? So I think, this actually does provide the US leeway to halt the operation should they want. And given the difficulties of negotiations, I do believe that the only way this war is going to stop is if Trump is convinced that the political costs are becoming too high for him. And, that is happening, particularly, MAGA, one section is opposed, but the bulk still support Trump. But you see, it's that middle voter who swung towards Trump, who enabled his victory. And that middle voter, I think, is getting increasingly disgruntled with the war. So you can see that the overall polling approval ratings are so low, and this is probably the lowest that any US military engagement overseas has enjoyed at this stage of the operation, so early in the operation, that there is so little popular support for this military conflict in the US.
So, as part of his speech, very interestingly, he says that I'm going to tell America how great I am. And then he starts on to talk about Qasem Soleimani, how during his first tenure he got him killed, and now it was Khamenei. As far as proving himself as a great leader who's done something great in America, on that count, what kind of an impact do you see on the minds of the Americans?
Look, obviously, for a section of Americans, they still follow him blindly, the MAGA. But it's increasingly a section of America, whereas mainstream America is getting disillusioned with his leadership. Of course, there's been equally fierce opposition to him from Democratic supporters. But I'm talking about mainstream America, for whom these constant military entanglements, this constant military conflicts overseas, I think it hits them because look, oil. Even though the US is self-sufficient in oil, when oil prices rise globally, then those prices hit the US consumer as well. And so oil prices in the US are now $4 a gallon. And that means there's been quite a big rise in oil prices in the US. And every US car user feels it at the pump when they go to fill fuel, because they have been used to lower prices. So it's not as though the consequences and the fallout of this conflict in terms of high oil prices can be escaped by the US. They are not immune to this.
Right.
And then that leads to, as what could I call it, cascading inflation in other commodities. Once the price of oil rises, the price of moving goods rise. And so, the price of other commodities also begin to feel the impact of the increased cost of transportation.
Right. But during his 20-minute speech, Meera Shankar, did you feel a little odd that there was no mention about India anywhere or Prime Minister Modi? And of course, the kind of problems now which India is going to face. Another maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks of uncertainty, and the problems for India mount day by day because of the crisis of gas, oil. Did you also feel a little odd as to why Donald Trump did not mention India? And also, there are stories again coming in, reports that Islamabad is very, very keen to further negotiate any kind of a deal between Iran and America.
Well, they are passing messages, and the Iranians, the US has put forward a 15-point proposal, which the Iranians have accepted as illogical, unreasonable, and extreme. And on the other hand, they have responded with their own demands, including war reparations and acknowledgement of their control of the Straits of Hormuz, guarantees that there will be no further strikes, and so on. So the gulf between the two positions is very, very wide and may not allow for the talks to go anywhere. The Pakistanis and the Chinese have come out with a joint 5-point plan, basically calling for an immediate ceasefire, immediate commencement of negotiations for peace, and ensuring security of non-military infrastructure by commitments to no attacks against non-military infrastructure, and ensuring security of sea lanes and shipping, which would include the Strait of Hormuz, and 5, giving priority to the UN Charter and the UN. So this is the 5-point proposal that China and Pakistan have put forward. May not go anywhere. I haven't seen much talk about it. Nobody is referring to it. The US will certainly not want to pick up a China-based plan. President Putin is talking to the Gulf states. I think the president of Egypt he's going to meet. He's offered that he's ready to help as well. So we really don't know where things are going to go. To have both Israel and the Gulf states pushing the US to escalate and to complete what they have started, saying, if you don't complete the job, you will leave behind an emboldened Iran. Now, the Gulf states are not unanimous. Qatar and Oman definitely would prefer dialogue and peace. It is UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait who are pushing for the operation. So not a unanimous view amongst the Gulf states. But Egypt and other countries have put forward a statement, essentially, on this, basically saying that the price of oil could touch $200 if the war is escalated. And there are attacks on energy infrastructure in the region, as Trump is threatening, and Iran is threatening to attack energy infrastructure in neighboring countries. Then, it would really impact the global economy, and particularly developing countries, which is why countries like Egypt, I think it's Egypt, Turkey, Pakistan, Jordan, Indonesia, maybe it's quite a number of countries who have given this statement really calling for a halt.
So the last question to you, ma'am, is that, so what does this 20 minutes televised address of Donald Trump actually convey? Does it convey a status quo? Does it convey more aggression in the coming days, maybe 2 to 3 weeks? Because no proper deadline is there, but he has given signals that yes, he wants to exit out of the war. But how soon he can do it, that's not very clear. So what do we say? I mean, he's said it so many times in his posts put out on Truth Social. He's been talking about the ceasefire yesterday also. I mean, last evening, he said that Iran wants ceasefire. And then today also, the televised address has not said much, giving clearer signals as to which way this entire war is headed to.
Look, as I said, he is playing both cards at the same time, because he clearly doesn't want a prolonged conflict in which he gets bogged down. He has given clear signals that he wants to exit, but what the end game is for him to be able to exit, I don't think he's very clear in his own mind. And the Iranians are certainly not going to make it easy for him. They are saying we will, keep fighting. As long as US and Israel keep striking us, we will keep fighting. So that is their position. So really the way I see this ending is that if at some stage Trump unilaterally declares that his objectives have been met, and stops the operation.
Right.
But he'll have to announce that. But I guess he'll have to announce that.
Yeah, he'll have to announce it, and he'll have to pull his forces back. All the deployments that he's made in the region, he will have to pull them back to the US.
Right.
All right, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining on HW News. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.